Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Bible Talk Live. I am Bill Rose.
And I am Brian Carey.
Brian, good to see you. This week it is just you and me. In fact, Doug's on vacation. It's just going to be you and me for the next 3 Sundays.
Well, we will miss Doug. I hope he's having a great time on vacation, and he better send some pictures back this time.
Yeah, we will miss him because normally he kind of runs this, and you and I answer questions and jump in
Yes.
where we feel like we can. So this week I'm running it, and we'll see how it goes. But for 3 weeks, he had started a thing on the family, and I wasn't exactly sure where he was going with that. So I decided during this 3-week absence, this 3-show absence, that I was going to do what I wanted to do. So that's what we're going to do. In fact, the title of this is "Why Do I Believe?" Now, I'm going to tell you, for me, evidences of Christianity have always been important. I've studied them. I've thought about them a lot. I've talked to them about them with people who were struggling with belief. Does God exist? Can we believe in God? And then the ultimate question, can we trust in God? And so all of those become an issue. And so we're going to talk these next 3 weeks about why do I believe. And this week it's going to be a personal journey, because I believe, and I think you do too,
Absolutely.
that everyone has their own journey to believe. And different things really spur it on, but everyone has a journey to belief, and not everyone's story is the same. Now, when we get there, the idea of believing, repenting, being baptized for the remission of our sins, and all of that, that becomes pretty much the same for everyone. But the journey there becomes very different, and your journey is different from my journey.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk about that a little bit as we go on.
Yeah, I think that's true. And our journeys can be, some people's journeys are very emotional fueled, and they learn more as they go. Other people's journeys are very logic driven. Like, I don't want any emotion in this because I don't want to be tricked. So I'm going to do this very logically and study this and understand this. And like, the emotion comes later, and they both have their pros and cons on how that works. People often, and I like that you mentioned evidence right out of the box, that our faith by many outside the Christian arena is kind of looked at as a weakness. Well, you're believing in something that you can't prove. Your faith is, this is your weakness. That's really not what faith is, though, is it, Bill?
No, it's not. In fact, I've heard that a lot over the years. I've heard newscasts about Christians, and I've heard people call it blind faith. They have a blind faith. And what they often mean by that is that, well, they believe in something even though there's no good reason to believe in it. I really object to that. And in those categories that you mentioned, the one that's emotional, the other that is, more logical, I probably fall into that more logical category, quite honestly. I don't get emotional easily, and I don't let emotions drive me. I'm really driven by how I think, and what I can study, and what I can look at, and what I can get my hands on. And when I look back, for example, the Restoration movement, from which our movement came out of, I see those same 2 elements. I mean, it's interesting that you brought it up. I see those same 2 elements in that movement. You look at certain preachers, they were emotionally driven. You look at others, it was far more logically driven, like Alexander Campbell, for example. He was a debater. And he loved to debate people, and he loved to debate atheists. And so he was the one out of the box who just thought, he was a thinker. And others were far more emotionally driven in that. And so it's really interesting that you do that. But we're going to start with a story in the Bible. And this is about Thomas. And most people know the name of Thomas. They often call him, and it's usually kind of a term of derision. They usually call him Doubting Thomas.
Doubting Thomas.
But Doubting Thomas has a story, and I'm gonna reject the name as being a name of derision. I'm gonna reject that.
He's probably sitting in heaven like, come on, guys, seriously?
Yeah, leave me alone. Because he offers up something really good to us. So we're going to read that passage, and then you and I are going to talk about Thomas's story a little bit, his journey, and then we're going to talk a little bit about yours. I think Christianity can be personal. I often tell people when they are thinking about reaching someone, they know someone, they want to become a Christian. How do I do it? What passages do I use? We can talk about all of that, but I often tell them, just tell them your story. Tell them what it's done in your life. Tell them what a difference it has made. Your story is important. And so every Christian has a story. Some of them are similar, but many of them are very, very different in how we got here. And so that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. And so we're going to start with John chapter 20, 24 through 31.
I'll read that in the New Living Translation of Scripture. John chapter 20, starting in verse 24. Feel free to follow along if you've got your Bible handy. Otherwise, listen up. Here we go. One of the 12 disciples, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, was not with the others when Jesus came. They told him, "We have seen the Lord." But Thomas replied, "I won't believe it unless I see the nail wounds in his hands, put my fingers into them, and place my hand into the wound in his side." 8 days later, the disciples were together again, and this time Thomas was with them. The doors were locked, but suddenly, as before, Jesus was standing among them. "Peace be with you," he said. Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and look at my hands. Put your hand into the wound in my side. Don't be faithless any longer. Believe." "My Lord and my God," Thomas exclaimed. Then Jesus told him, "You believe because you have seen me. Blessed are those who believe without seeing me." The disciples saw Jesus do many other miraculous signs in addition to the ones recorded in this book. But these are written so that you may continue to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing in him, you will have life by the power of his name.
Well, I tell you, it's a great passage, and it's a great story with Thomas. And one of the things that I see here is that faith is a personal journey. We see the others, they came to faith rather quickly, but they saw him. And one of the things I often tell people, and we're going to talk about this in time, maybe not today, but we're going to talk about this. And I often tell people that eyewitness testimony is important, and I believe that it is. But I don't think it's all that there is. So here we have with Thomas, Brian, all of his friends come to him, the other disciples, and they have seen Jesus. Thomas, for whatever reason, was not there when he came this time. And so they've seen him. They came immediately to believe that he was resurrected from the dead, because they also saw his dead body. They knew he had died. Mm-hmm. I mean, every one of us have seen death. We've seen it in animals. We've seen it in human beings. We've seen it in people that we love. These people were not ignorant. They knew that he had died, and here he was standing before them. And they knew that was miraculous in every single way. So they came immediately to believe. But when they tell Thomas about it, even though he knows them, even though he has some confidence in them, he has been with them for the better part of 3 years now. He has heard them. They have talked together. They've spent time together. But when they tell him he's alive, he did not believe it.
I wouldn't either. Honestly, when we talked a little bit about this before we started our show here, like if you or Doug came up to me and say, "Brian, we just saw Jesus. He came back." You know what I'm going to tell you? How about no, you didn't. You're messing with me. There's no way. That did not happen. Because, like as you pointed out, we're rational, knowledgeable, thinking people. That doesn't happen. People don't come back from the dead. That's right. You're messing with me. There's no way that's true. And you know what else I found interesting in this passage here as we're going through this? When Jesus says to Thomas here in verse 27, he's like, "Put your finger here. Look at my hands. Put your hand into the wound in my side." And then he says this, "Don't be faithless any longer, believe." Jesus has shown him proof.
Yes.
And he said, by this proof that Jesus is showing him, now you won't be faithless any longer. Yeah. What does that say about blind faith?
Yeah, it really says a lot. And number one, it tells me that Jesus is not opposed to giving proof. And in fact, we're going to talk about it going into next week and a week after. There's a lot of proof.
Yes.
There's a lot of reason to believe. Now, I can't show anyone standing here Jesus, or I can't show them God, who's a spirit, by the way. But nevertheless, even though I can't show them that, there's a lot of reason to believe it. There are a lot of evidence. There's much evidence for it. And so it tells me, number one, that Jesus didn't mind giving him the evidence. He could have said to him, Brian, he could have said, what is wrong with you? Your pals tell you, the other disciples tell you that he's alive, and you still won't believe it. What is with that? What is wrong with you? He could have chastised him, right? But he doesn't do that. In fact, he just simply offers him the proof that he wanted. This is what Thomas wanted. I want to touch the wounds. I want to see that he's real. I want to know. Just seeing him wasn't going to be enough. I want to know that what he has gone through is real, and I can see it and touch it, and then I'll believe. And Jesus gives him exactly what he needs. Now it may be because I'm a born skeptic. I'm going to say that probably several times. I'm a born skeptic.
I'm right there with you, brother.
But the reality is that maybe God does give us what we need. We're going to talk about our stories a little bit because everybody has a story, right? That's going to be our theme. We're going to talk about our stories a little bit. And maybe God does know exactly what we need in order to come to belief. And if we're willing, he'll show us exactly what we need. And that's one of the things that I see in Thomas. He gives Thomas precisely what he needs.
So you're saying maybe as we try and guide people and help people in their spiritual walk to Christ and understand, you're saying perhaps that we all have a different burden of proof that we require before we'll cross the line and go do something. And the Lord knows what that is, and he's going to give you just enough that you need to help you on your spiritual walk. Am I getting that right? Is that?
Yeah, no, I really do believe that. You see some people who grow up in Christian homes, they just grow up believing it. They never think about it, and then ultimately sometime in their life, they choose to make that faith their own, and they step out in faith. And that's fine. There's no problem with that. But there are others, and I'm one of those people, that it wasn't going to work like that. I did not grow up in a Christian home, which I'll talk about in time with us, but I didn't grow up in a Christian home. I didn't grow up with these ideas and thoughts. And I don't know what I believed about Jesus or what I believed about God, but I didn't necessarily believe that it was all true. And I wasn't necessarily an atheist either, but I didn't believe necessarily that it was all true. And so I did need a greater level of proof. I needed something else to look at. Why can I believe this? Why should I believe this? Really became a dominant thought in my life, and we'll talk about it as time goes on. But yeah, I think some people need more of that, and some people need less.
I like reading some of Lee Strobel's books because I think his approach was also very logical, and some people want the emotional path. And as we might both be skeptical, but you said you're more of a logical person. I'm really a lot more of an emotional guy. I'm a very emotional guy. So I don't always trust it, and so I kind of, for my Christian walk, I had to kind of shove all that emotion to the side and go, okay, I need to double down on the logic here. Like, you can't just get lost in the effluvium of these feelings. Like, I really want to know. Like, I have to believe this. Because at the end of the day, I'm probably right there with Thomas. I'm like, yeah, sorry guys, I don't think that happened, and I want you to prove it to me, and I need to know it. And so it's interesting too. So my Christian journey is kind of the opposite direction from yours. You kind of went from you said you weren't atheist, but kind of a atheistic, there wasn't really God in your daily life.
Oh, exactly right.
Right,
exactly
and so mine, I came from a heavily Christian background, but it was all wrong. Like this was not real Christianity, but it kind of had some Christian labels on it. But it was a mess, and I had to leave all that awfulness behind.
Well, and for me, I was probably closer to a deist. I probably believe more that there's probably a God out there, but you can't know him. And I was probably one of those. I didn't give it a lot of thought because I became a Christian at age 23, but I was probably one of those that really believed that God probably set things in order, he put
kind of wound up the clock.
And
built the
just kind of
universe
let
and
things
let
go.
it run.
He's out there someplace beyond the blue, and you really can't know who he is or what he is or anything about him. And so I was probably one of those people that just thought there was a God out there, but he doesn't have a whole lot to do with us. He's not very personal with us. We really can't know him. And people that say they do, they're really kidding themselves to believe that they can. He's just out there. And so I was probably a guy who thought more like that. Now, Thomas didn't. Thomas, I think he may have been more like you. He was more emotional. And it surprises me, by the way, when you say you're more emotional. It surprises me. Nothing wrong with it,
Nope.
but it does surprise me, and so Thomas, is requiring more, though. He's just not going to believe, even this testimony, he's not going to just believe it. He has to have more to come to a solid faith. And then in the end, he says to him, my Lord and my God. And so, he comes to the point, he's been with Jesus for the better part of 3 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so now he comes to the point where he realizes who Jesus really is. Now, they've given lip service to this before, by the way, which is really what a lot of people do. A lot of people give lip service to a faith in God. It's just lip service. They still see him as a God way out there who doesn't really have much to do with us personally. And so one of the things that I want people to know, and then I'll let you talk a little bit, is that when we're 2,000 years distance from the resurrection, from the miracles and all of those things, but it suffers no loss when we look for the proof of all of it. It suffers no loss, even though it's been 2,000 years. We still often need to know that happened. I'm like you. I'm a reasonable, rational person. People don't come back from the dead. I've been living now for quite a while. I've done many, many funerals. I've seen many, many dead people. I've never seen one come back from the dead. And I feel the same way about the virgin birth, for example. We talk about the virgin birth. I'm a reasonable, rational person.
I know what causes that.
who doesn't believe in things like that because we know what causes it. And so the question that I want to give to you is, do we diminish faith by wanting evidence?
Do we diminish faith by wanting evidence? I don't think that's the case, because each generation, each Christian, every single one of us, as we come to the Lord, we have to have that proven to us at some level. We have to believe it. So we might be 2,000 years from the crucifixion and the resurrection, but you and me, we had to have that proven to us too. If Thomas was there, I think the part of the story is Thomas was personally there. He personally saw Jesus die, and he heard this testimony that Jesus is back, and he still needed it proved to him. Right? How am I any different? How are you any different? At the end of this, it doesn't matter that 2,000 years goes by. I still have to know, just like Thomas, I wasn't there. He's got the benefit at least having personally met Jesus, and I don't even have that. So I need that kind of that burden of proof at some level kind of gets, I think, pushed to the Lord, if that's fair. It's kind of on him to go, hey guys, he has to kind of tap you on the shoulder and say, this is the proof you need. You get this much. I know you. This is how much proof you need. And you can respond to that or not.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And Thomas is the great evidence of that. There he was there and wanted proof. And so, folks, you're listening to us possibly on WFOB 1430 AM on the radio. We've been with them for a long, long time, had a short period of time where we weren't, but they've been very, very good to us. And so we're on every Sunday morning, Brian, at 7:56 a.m., We're also on YouTube. We're also on Facebook, where you can catch us and you can actually see us talking. Not that that's necessarily a great thing, but you can actually see us talking. And the church here is at 14455 Campbell Hill Road here in BG. The web is ccbg.life. And so we encourage people to go there. We encourage them to check out our church. We welcome everyone to come in and be here. Our phone number is 419-354-1176. And I tell you what, we don't get many, but I would love to have questions.
Oh, yeah.
I would love to have questions. It would be fun to sit down and to go over questions that people have and talk about it and let them see their questions answered as we can. And so we want folks to join us and to be part of our audience as we stream this and as we talk on radio, on WFOB. And to really feel like they're a part of our broadcast, Brian.
Yeah, you can go on to ccbg.life, send an email, ask a question, or leave comments under the comment section in YouTube or there in Facebook, and we'll come back and we'll have probably an episode on that. It's if it warrants it. There's enough material there. Yeah,
and you can go to our website ccbg.life. and you can actually interact there, I believe, and leave questions and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
My email is there, and Doug's is there, and you can email us with questions, and we'll answer them on air. Just let us know that you heard it on the radio or watching us on Facebook or YouTube, and we'll be glad to have you do that. Now, Brian, one of the things that I wanted to talk about, because we're looking at Thomas's personal journey, and we've said that everyone has a personal journey to faith. It's not always the same. But I think what you said before, in that people, even when they grow up in the body of Christ, when they grow up with parents who are Christians, they've heard evidence. They've heard a lot of these things. They may not be able to talk about it all, but they've heard it, and it has really bolstered their faith a great deal. So everybody has a story. Everybody has a journey to faith, and I want to talk to you a little bit about yours. Now, I know a little bit. And but I think it's an interesting story. And again, we all start at different places. I met a guy in Kansas one time, and he was a Christian. He was really rough around the edges. But when I heard his story, I realized why. This guy had been kicked out of the house when he was 11 years old by a stepmother who didn't like him.
Oh,
and from
man.
that point on, he was alone in life. And so the very fact that he had come to Christ at that moment in time and was part of our fellowship, I mean, was a real blessing knowing that. But we don't often get to know one another's stories. And so I want to give you some time to talk about your story, and I'll ask you some questions. I'll talk about mine a little bit, because we want to make this personal, because this is about our personal journeys. We want folks to know who are listening that the fact is that we all get to Christ sometimes in different ways. Now, when we get there, it's all the same, but our journey there is often very, very different. And so I want to talk a little bit about your journey to Christ, where you started out.
Wow. Yeah. So my story is kind of the opposite, comes from kind of the opposite direction, where I have all this junk and that I had to throw the shackles of off of me to unburden my life. And what I'm left with is Jesus and grace and love. When you had to go put that all, go put the entrapments of Christianity on.
Now you got to that point because you grew up of parents that were dedicated to their religious faith.
Yeah, they believed in it was technically, I guess you would still call it a Christian church, but it's right on the fringe of at this point, it's right on the fringe of not being a Christian church. They had the name of Christ, but the church group that I grew up with, that I was raised in, was some kind of weird hybrid between, to be honest, it was like a cross between a con artist scam and a doomsday cult. It was just a complete mess.
Gotcha.
Right. So they
you wouldn't feel bad calling it a cult. It was
definitely, it was a personality cult. When the leader died, everything fell apart.
Gotcha.
And so at some point when I was about 16, the leader who had started all this, he died. Well, the world was supposed to end, and he wasn't supposed to die before the world came to an end. Well, there's your first clue, kids, that's not it's not all the way that was supposed to work. He had made many prophecies, and none of them came true. I mean, if you're going to prophesy something, at least prophesy the sun's going to come up tomorrow in the east, right? Something that might
something that might happen,
something that might actually happen. So he's got the world ending in this year and the Christ returning in that year.
Well, one of the things that's amazing,
just a train wreck.
I'll throw in some questions as we go,
Sure.
but I want you to keep talking about it because I find it an interesting story, quite honestly. One of the things that I think is fascinating was at that point when you're coming to realize that this isn't right, it isn't real, it isn't helpful, it's judgmental, condemnation. It is easy for a lot of people, and a lot of people have been in groups like that. It is easy to give up and walk away.
Yes.
But you didn't.
I've asked myself that question a lot of times. It's like my relationship to the Lord was kind of in one channel in my brain, and then there was all this religion that I grew up with that was kind of in a separate channel. This is all, I got to do this to make the Lord happy, and that isn't how that works whatsoever.
Yeah.
But I know that now. So it was this very legalistic group. They believed in select portions of the Old Testament for the laws that belonged only to the nation of Israel. They went, no, we're going to apply a lot of that stuff to your life now. So you keep the Jewish holidays and keep certain food laws, and it was kind of a weird mishmash, just enough to make you an oddball, and not enough to actually impact how much money you could make for the leader. So I eventually got kicked out of that church. I got banned and disfellowshipped, and I had a T-shirt at one point. It said "Leader of the Band." It was BANNED instead of BAND, because I actually had the audacity to think. I had questions. I had read some information from another church group, and I went, you know what? That actually makes sense. That fits. Now, I don't understand all of this yet because, again, you're raised, when you grow up with it, you just have this, your whole field of vision is covered up with all this junk. But I'm reading some other literature now, and I'm thinking, this other stuff makes sense. Well, they found out that I'm reading other people's literature, and I'm asking questions, and they immediately kicked me out of that church because I'm effectively a cancer at that point. They don't want me to affect anybody else by asking some of these questions. Now I'm in another church that was kind of a splinter church of that one. And I was there for a number of years. And now I've got an issue because they were wrong about something. I'm convinced now that they were wrong about some doctrines in my original church. And so now I'm asking myself, well, if they were wrong about this, could there be anything else they have wrong? And so I set about this journey to try and fix my Christian walk. Like, I still believe in this whole doomsday cult con artist guys thing.
Yeah.
But I know there's some problems, and I'm going to find them. That's my personal job.
Yeah, and in the midst of all this, Jesus is continuing to work with you, I think.
He is. I didn't understand it then, and some of the clues that I followed didn't lead the direction I thought they were going to. For example, I still really believed all the Old Testament Israelite laws still applied to me, and they don't. So I found a place that said, we're supposed to not buy and sell and eat food purchased on the Sabbath day.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so I immediately agreed. Okay. Well, then we're doing that wrong. I'm going to follow that rule, and I'm not going to eat out on the Sabbath day any longer. And that was an affront to these people because they ate out all the time on the Sabbath day. But I am being the good legalist, and I'm following the law better than they are. And eventually, I got kicked out of that church too, and then there's a third one, and I mean, it's just this, as I'm walking out, I keep examining things, and the problem, Bill, that I was having was the more doctrines that I was examining, and this is clearly the Lord and the Holy Spirit working with me, it actually felt like this. I kid you not. I would have this doctrine would come to me, and I knew that I was supposed to study that. So I would study whatever that would be, whether it's tithing or clean and unclean meats or, all these different lot of Old Testament laws. Like, does that apply to me, or are we doing this right in this church? And I would study that thing, and I knew that that was the thing that I was supposed to study next. And I would go and I would examine that, and most of the time, I would determine, like, well, that's wrong. And pretty soon I'm so out of sync with the legalistic patterns of the churches that I'm into that I end up having to leave. And what happened at the end was I had just about eliminated almost all the things that I had believed from my childhood. There wasn't very many beliefs I had in common left. There was only like Sabbath and holy days and just a handful of tiny things. And if I didn't examine that next doctrine, I would not get anything else from the Lord. I didn't feel like he was showing me anything else to study. I'm like, Lord, I don't want to study this because if this is wrong, what do I have left? Like I've got nothing left. And so I studied on these next things about Sabbath and holy days, and I went, this is really about the covenant. These are things given to ancient Israel. They're really not given to me as a Gentile. I'm not an Israelite. I don't,
exactly.
That religion is destroyed.
Exactly.
And so I thought to myself, well, I got nothing left. I'm alone. And that was kind of this moment and I still remember this moment. I'm kind of having this emotional free fall at this point. Like, oh no, what do I do? And all I had left was Jesus. And I don't have all the answers to all the trick, confusing verses that they had programmed into my head all my life. And I really needed to find a place like Christ Church where I could go and find a healing group of people and say, Bill, what does this verse actually mean? What does this mean? Because you come to this point where, is it all legalism or is it grace? Because you almost can't have both. You can't strictly adhere and be like I'm doing everything right and I'm earning my own salvation, or you given this as grace as a free gift, is your salvation a free gift from the Lord. You can't have it both ways. And coming from that legalism to grace was a massive transition for me. And this is Christ Church has been a huge part of helping me turn that corner and really help me heal as a Christian. But for some reason, I never sacrificed Jesus in that whole process. He was the one constant that I couldn't get rid of. You never get to the point where like, and there is no Jesus. Like that's not a thing.
Yeah.
He was always there. He was the one thing that I could be sure of, whilst all the religious entrapments around it were things that for me, for a long time, were in flux.
Yeah. And there may be people listening who have been where you are. I mean, you grew up in a family where you were taught these things. You went to churches where you were taught these things. You struggled with what they meant, how to apply them, and whether or not you could do enough to appease God doing all of this. Is there something I'm missing? Is there something I'm not doing? Is there something more I need to do? And all of a sudden, those works just encompass your life because, I like one thing you said. You said all that I had left was Jesus. And I'm thinking in my head, man, you had everything left. That was everything. And a lot of people don't really get that in their lives. They don't come to understand that. Even mainline churches, they often come into those churches thinking, well, if I can do this and this and this and this and this, I'm going to be okay with God. And yet you find out by doing all of those things that you're not okay with God because in your mind you're constantly thinking, I'm not doing enough, I don't know enough, I need more, I've got to do more with this or with that. One of the things when I first went to school, I was a clean slate. See, that's where you and I are really different. You had all of that to overcome. For me, I was a clean slate. I had nothing to overcome. So when I was in theology school, and this happened on many occasions, somebody'd raise their hand in class, and they would be upset about something because of something the teacher just said, something they just taught, and all of a sudden, what they thought about that has fallen by the wayside. What they thought about that hasn't worked. It's like, wait a minute. That's not what I thought. I thought it was this, or I thought it was that. And they could be upset by that. And with me, I was a clean slate. All I was doing was soaking in everything they were teaching because I didn't have to undo all the things that are in the past.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I didn't have to undo doctrines.
We're fighting with these things completely. So, like, I became the most skeptical. Like, I'm not going to believe anything unless you. Like, I need the finger of God to come write this on the wall before I believe this now. Because you fooled me once, shame on you. But like, that's it. I'm not going to be fooled ever again. At this point, I mean, I just came in like you're pulling the horse when he's got his feet out, like, no. I'm not going to
everything.
I'm going to fight everything.
Yeah.
I don't trust anything or anybody. Everybody's got an axe to grind. Everybody's lying to me because at that point in my life, and I know we're nearly out of time here.
We are nearly out of time.
But at that point in my life, and maybe some other Christians will identify with this, every single religious leader in my life, my parents, the elders, the ministers, everybody, every single person had failed me, Bill.
Yeah. Well, and so from that, we came from a different point of view. And for me, once I came to belief in Christ, everything else was just about learning. Christ started out as everything. And so it was wonderful from that standpoint. But your story is interesting, my fella. And I'll tell you, there are a lot of people that will identify with it. And so we're grateful that you told it today. I'm going to tell more of mine as we get into lesson, but next week we're going to talk about evidence that demands a verdict. We're glad you have joined us. We hope you'll join us next week, same time on Bible Talk Live.